Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Fried Mozzarella Puffs. That's right, people love bumpy food, especially when it's also crispy, and produced by frying cheese, which is exactly what we have here, as I'm attempting to update and sophisticate the good old-fashioned fried mozzarella stick. And not only are these tastier, more interesting, and more fun to eat, they're also much easier and don't require any breading. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by making a very, very simple pastry dough, which we'll start by adding a little bit of butter to this pan, along with some cold fresh water, and what looks like a lot of salt. But it's not, since we're going to be working with mozzarella, which tends to be a little bit bland. And what we're going to do here is set our heat to medium-high, and as soon as the water starts to simmer, and that butter melts or almost melts, we'll go ahead and dump in our flour all at once, reduce our heat to medium, and stir that in with a small spatula or wooden spoon, freakishly small or otherwise. And it's not going to look like things are going well when you first start, but don't worry, just keep mixing and stirring and smearing. And eventually all the flour lumps are going to disappear, and it will all eventually pull together and smooth out, at which point all we have to do is cook it stirring for about 2 or 3 minutes. And as we do this, that dough is going to kind of want to stick to the bottom, but because of the moisture in the dough, as we kind of stir and scrape, it's also going to not want to stick to the bottom. Okay, so basically the dough doesn't know what it wants to do. But anyway, like I said, we will cook that for 2 or 3 minutes, scraping and rubbing that pan as clean as we can. And then what we'll do once that's been accomplished is quickly remove that from the heat and transfer it into a mixing bowl, where we will let it cool for about 5 to 10 minutes. And to help that process, it's always a good idea to kind of spread it out. And really, all we're waiting for is for this mixture to go from very, very hot to just very warm, which if I had to guess is going to take between 5 and 10 minutes. And then what we'll do once this is cooled a bit is season it up with some freshly ground black pepper, along with the obligatory shake of cayenne. And then we will add 1 large egg from a distance of about 3 feet, so that the yolk breaks when it hits. And by the way, that last instruction actually serves no practical purpose. It's just something fun to do. And then to finish this, what we'll do is take a whisk and mix this until it all comes together to form a very soft, very, very sticky dough. And fair warning, when you first start doing this, it's going to look like something went tragically and horribly wrong. But don't worry, just keep mixing. And eventually it will all come together. Literally come all together. As in it will all come together stuck inside your whisk. And that's how you're going to know it's done. And then once that happens, we'll take a spatula and clean off our whisk into the bowl, which is by far the hardest part of this whole recipe. And it is a lot faster if you kind of bang the whisk on the bowl. But then you'll probably have little pieces of dough stuck to your wall and ceiling. So I'm just going to go with the spatula. So we will clean off our whisk, and then give that one last mix with the spatula to make sure everything's beautifully smooth. And then what's going to happen next, once we have that all together in one lump, and we've scraped down the sides of our bowl the best we can, is we're going to cover this in plastic and refrigerate it for about an hour before we add our cheese, which is why we'll wrap it with the spatula. And while that's chilling, we can go ahead and make our marinara sauce dip, which is simply going to be some prepared marinara sauce that we will accessorize with the following ingredients: some dry oregano, some red pepper flakes, if you want it spicy, which we do. We will also do a little splash of balsamic vinegar. And then last but not least, 1 anchovy fillet, or as we call it around the office, Italian MSG. And then what we'll do is go ahead and give this a stir, and we will bring this up to a simmer on medium heat. And that is pretty much going to be it. Other than giving it a stir or two, we'll just let that simmer for about 10 minutes, and then we can turn it off and just keep it in a warm spot until we're ready to use it. And it is kind of nice if the sauce is served warm, but room temperature is totally fine. Okay, so our sauce is done. And then assuming our dough is chilled, we'll go ahead and pull that out. And we will finish this off by grating in a relatively large amount of low moisture mozzarella cheese, also known as not the good mozzarella cheese. Okay, for this recipe to work, we really have to use the firmer, drier stuff, which means that beautiful, fresh, creamy mozzarella is not going to work here. And by not work, I mean explode in the oil. So this time we're going to let you buy the cheap stuff. And for heaven's sake, grate it yourself. Okay, cellulose dust is not on the ingredient list. So we'll go ahead and grate that in and give it a mix with a spatula. And what's kind of funny here is we're adding so much cheese, this recipe actually shouldn't work. but somehow it does. And then once we're sure that's been mixed in and distributed evenly, we'll scrape our spatula down with a spoon, and then grab a second spoon, since that's how I like to get this dough into the oil. Okay, so we'll take some with one spoon, and then if we want, we can kind of shape it with the other into sort of an oval shape, which, by the way, is completely optional, since it's been my experience no matter how carefully you shape these, they all kind of look the same once they're fried, which I will prove later. And then what we'll do once we have the amount and shape we want is carefully transfer that into some 350-degree oil, which, by the way, mine wasn't. I was impatient, and it probably was just over 300. And the problem with that, especially if you're trying to get away with just a couple inches of oil, is that it can and will stick to the bottom, although it usually will release easily with a little nudge. But anyway, what we'll do is fry that for about 2 or 3 minutes, or until browned and crispy. And for this test, I'm just doing one. But you can easily do 4 or 5 or 6 at a time. And other than going by the appearance, one way you can tell these are done is that you'll see little tiny pieces of mozzarella poking up through the surface, which I was trying to show you by flipping this over, but it wasn't working. Okay, you're going to kind of see it here as I lift it out. And that's it. We'll just drain that for a minute on a napkin or paper towel, at which point it's ready to enjoy. And if these are still hot or even warm, when you break it in half and pull it apart, you're going to get that super sexy string cheese effect, which everybody loves, especially the kids. And crispy texture and stretchy visuals aside, these things taste like a beautifully creamy hunk of warm, melty mozzarella cheese. So other than the oil temp, that was my very successful test. And I proceeded to fry 4 more, intentionally not spending any time shaping them. Okay, I'm pretty much just scooping some of the dough and pushing it off with the other spoon. And other than making sure your oil's at the right temp, the other thing to be careful of is not to drop these on top of each other. Okay, after a few seconds, that surface will seal, and you'll be fine. But when you drop another one in, make sure there's not one right under it. And like I said earlier, we'll fry these for about 2 to 3 minutes. And of course, the exact time is going to depend on how much dough you spooned in. So you'll have to observe and adjust. I mean, you guys are after all the Jimmy G's of how long to fry your cheese. But about 3 minutes is a good guess. Or just fry them until they look a little something like this. And of course, as the one frying, any little random bits of rogue dough that fall into the oil, you are allowed to eat. Micro puff. And as you can hopefully see, even if you don't shape these, they still come out looking quite nice and very, very enticing. Although for comparison purposes, I did fry 4 more after these, taking the time to shape them as carefully as possible. And while they do maybe look a little more uniform, those 4 in the front do not look that much differently than those 4 in the back we fried before these. So the point is, do not stress trying to get these perfect going into the oil. And then because this is an Italian-American appetizer, we are required by law to garnish with a little bit of parsley. And that's it. These are now ready to officially enjoy, which I would have loved to do right away so the cheese was still stretchy. But I didn't. I took way too many pictures. So these cooled down, and I didn't get the sexy cheese stretch. But that's fine. Even at room temp, these are still amazing, especially dipped in that extra flavorful, slightly spicy sauce. And even though my brain knew these weren't stretchy, my fingers did not get the message, so I kept trying to pull it apart to stretch it. But even though these weren't visually stretchy, the insides are still beautifully creamy, and they really do taste like you're eating a piece of crispy, fresh mozzarella cheese. Although somehow, unlike eating a chunk of fried mozzarella, thanks to our French pastry, these are actually very, very light in texture, hence the name puff. Oh, and I should mention, if you're doing a large amount, you can reserve the ones you fried in a warm oven, and they hold beautifully. So something to keep in mind. But anyway, that's it. What we're calling fried mozzarella puffs. If you like fried mozzarella sticks, but don't enjoy all that messy breading and associated gunked up fingers, you are absolutely going to love these, which is why I really do hope you give them a try soon. So please follow the links below for all the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.